In the last video, we were in the middle of exploding our bicycle frame and had just completed the explosion of the head tube, top tube, and down tube. If I scroll to the top here, I can see in the explode step box the 3 separate steps that were used to do this. I'm now going to explode the components in the rear triangle, and I'll use a slightly different tactic for doing this. In this case, I'm going to click on all of the components that comprise the rear triangle, and we'll drag all of them together outward. Then I will click on these 3 components and drag them to the side, and do the same with these 3 components. Drag them in the opposite sideways direction, leaving the brake bridge and the stay bridge floating in the middle. Finally, I want to take the 2 dropouts. I can drag them this direction, and I can add a separate step to drag them downward in this direction so they look somewhat balanced between the seat stays and the chain stays. So you see, the same component can actually be exploded multiple times. For example, we exploded these 3 parts the first time as part of the entire triangle. Then we exploded them again going outward. Then this dropout got exploded once again going backwards, and got exploded a final time going downwards. So it was involved in 4 separate explode steps. The last part to explode is the seat tube, and it would be nice if I could explode it in a direction along its axis. The trouble is, when I click on it, the triad only allows me to explode in these 3 orthogonal directions, and I want to explode in a slightly off-angle direction. If I have some sort of an edge or an axis to use as a reference, I can actually explode in directions that are different from these 3 here. I don't have a convenient axis at the moment, but I can go to View, Temporary Axes, and that creates a temporary axis that passes through any cylindrical or revolved objects in the model. So you see them through the seat tube, bottom bracket, head tube, and the bridges. I can now take this box here, which is for the explode direction, clear what is ever in that box by hitting the delete key, click on this axis. It gives me a new triad which is rotated to align with this axis. I can grab the blue arrow and drag the seat tube along its axis. I won't bother exploding the bottom bracket because everything has been moved away from it anyway, so there's no point in moving it anywhere because all the parts are now separated from each other. If I'm not fully happy with the explosions I've done, I can always go back to these steps and edit them. For example, I can go back to step 1, right click on it, edit step, and if I want, I can always change the distance, for example, that the head tube is exploding by. Usually the distance input is the amount that was manually dragged, and perhaps I want to have a more specific distance like 250 millimeters. Or, considering this triangle explodes sideways and this triangle explodes sideways the other direction, maybe I want to make sure that both of them are shifting the same amount in opposite directions. I will identify that step, edit it, and I see that this explodes a little more than 158 millimeters in this direction. I can type something in like 100